So if the idea is there and your why, then why not? Welcome to Soul Hacks and welcome to the second episode of the Welcoming series. I'm Erna, I'm your host, and in today's episode I will tell you about how I got to this project and I will just answer some questions around this project. So let's jump into the episode. So, how do I got to this project, starting a podcast? Honestly, no idea. And it was actually also not my idea. It just happened that people came up to me asking if I want to start a podcast or when I will start a podcast. And I think the only reason they came up to me was because I was already sharing my thoughts and feelings on Instagram and I turned them into reels with like voiceovers. But every time when someone mentioned it, I was like, nah, nah, it's not the right time for now. But I like the idea. I had no idea how to like turn it into reality. If you would say to someone, do you want to start a podcast? How do you start a podcast? That's the question. But obviously, if there's an idea, there's also a way. It always happened to be just like a thought. It would be a nice project, but not for now. That's what I thought the whole time. Until last year in summer, I visited a friend and I met her in Sri Lanka. And for everyone who knows, Sri Lanka has such a special place in my heart. That's the place where my life changed completely. After Sri Lanka, I went to Australia and I was away for 2 years. So that was the very first time that we saw each other after I came back. And I remember that we met just before I left for Australia. And when we met, it was such a nice... It was so wholesome. I still have this one day so much in my heart. I keep it in my heart. It was so crazy because like she told me how she perceived me, how I was like, how excited I was before I went to Australia and how I grew and how I am now after I got back. So it was just so nice and so impactful. And she was actually the person that motivated me to actually start the project, to actually start the research, how to start a podcast. So it happened that I came back home and I started researching. And to be fair, the research was a bit tricky. It was a bit complex. You can find so much on the internet, but at the same time, so less. And I love researching. Honestly, like the research I did for Australia, I was in my element, honestly. I compared like all the websites I researched on and where I took my information from. And it is so confusing sometimes because like some websites, they don't go into details with some steps and they just have a big overview what you have to know if you want to start a podcast. But there's some things you really have to consider and you really have to deep dive into the research if you want to do it properly. Because every time when I do something, every project, every video, everything I do it 100% with my heart and with my soul. So obviously I wanted to do it right. So it took obviously ages to research. It was a bit complex, I'm not gonna lie. And also what I want to mention is that's how I felt when I started creating my videos for Instagram. You actually don't know anyone that goes through the same, or you don't know anyone you could ask for advice. I think it depends on the person and I think it depends on the situation, but it lets you feel lonely sometimes. It wasn't that present in terms of like the podcast project. You have a different kind of motivation and independence. It happened quite often that people message me asking if I'm not afraid or if I'm not scared in terms of like traveling or not having a plan or sharing things. And honestly, no, because you're not afraid if you're not too much in your head. Self-doubts are completely normal. Everyone has it. I have it as well. Not very often because I can work through it and I can avoid that if I'm just not too much in my head. That's one of my message to you. Don't be so much in your head. If you have an idea, just start. Nothing will be perfect at the beginning, but it is important to start. Otherwise, you're lost already. And especially if you think about what you have to share, there is something to share, I'm pretty sure, because everyone is so unique. You are unique. So is everything you do, everything you think, everything you feel, because everyone perceives life so differently. That is the beauty in life, in my perspective. You can enrich each other so much if you start to speak up, if you start to share. If you want to start a podcast, do it. I'm sure you have something to tell. Every voice is worthy, and every voice is worthy to hear. And don't forget to have fun. Don't take yourself too serious. Don't take your life too serious. If you have an idea, if you want to do it, fuck yeah, just do it. Because I would rather to try something and fail instead of always thinking, oh, what if? But if you do it, you can't say what if, because you know you already started and you did it. And that's a win. The outcome doesn't matter. The way is the win. The way is the prize. Yeah, I hope it makes sense. I hope what I want to say makes sense. So yeah, just fucking do it. If you do something with pure intention, then your motivation is such a different one. That's also like one thing. For example, the most important thing for me is that I have fun at work. Because if you have fun at work, you start your day in a completely different way. You are in a completely different mindset during the day. And your capacity and your motivation is so much higher, and it's so different compared to something you would do without passion or without motivation. So if the idea is there and your why, because you always have to think about why you want to do it. So if the idea is there and your why, then why not? Let's talk about my why. If you break it down, my why is pretty simple, but I want to talk about it a bit more. So obviously with every project, with everything you do, it is recommended to break down your why, to figure it out your why, to figure it out your motivation. So I already done it when I started creating my reels. That's how I can keep my motivation. Yeah, sometimes like I took maybe 2 or 3 weeks off. Not when I was back home. I took like 2 months off because I was sorting my pictures every single day. Other than that, I was pretty consistent, and I'm still consistent. I maybe took 1 or 2 weeks off when I wasn't feeling it at all. And as I just mentioned earlier, everything I do it with 100% of my heart and my soul. And if I'm not feeling it, I can't be creative. And I don't want to force it. So yeah, I took like 1-2 weeks off, but in general, I'm really proud of that. I normally post 3 times a week. Just because I just do it without actually thinking about it anymore. I know what my why is. It is so much in my weekly routine that I can't think of not doing it anymore. And it gives me so much every time when I finish a video. It's such a nice feeling if you see the whole, like the result and the finished product. Oh my god, I just love it so much. To get back to what I started, it is always recommended to break down your why. I already knew my why, but I did it again just to like remind myself. But I also sat down and thought about, what do we all have in common? What is the one thing we all have in common? The first thing that came to my mind was, we all live life for the very first time. We all figuring life out. We all figuring out emotions. We all figuring out feelings, and especially ourselves. We all feel, and we all want to feel love. And it might sound cheesy, but that's exactly my why. That's why I said it is simple. My why is love. I want to feel more love around me. I want to feel more love in the world. I want to feel more love in daily conversations, because I grew up feeling never understood with all the things I went through. Of course, I was surrounded by my family. Of course, I had friends, but you can be in a room full of people but still feel lonely. I think that's also one big reason why my why is love. I think I was 10 or 11, but I started going to therapy very early, and I always spoke about how I felt, what I go through when it happened. So I figured out pretty early in my life that talking about things helps me. And especially also having, I would describe it as a mentor, but having a person that navigates you in the right direction, also with your thoughts and like the way you solve things, had so much impact on the person I became. And my therapist, I love her so much, and she had such a big impact on me and such a good influence on me. And even if she might not agree with that, but I would always say she's the main reason why I am who I am and why I became the person I am now. She has such an important place in my life, an important place in my heart. I learned really early in my life how important it is to work on ourselves, how important it is to become the best version of yourself, becoming a whole without needing someone else but you. And it's also all about accepting more, reflecting more, loving more, and developing the empathy we need to be happy and to be content in our life, no matter in which surroundings we are. Being happy because of you, not because of the influence of others. And like our surroundings have such an impact and influence on our daily life. But if you have the happiness in yourself, that's your superpower, and no one can take that from you. And if everything is settled within, you radiate so much love and so much joy and so much light. Everyone is so different, and everyone will go on a different journey. So it will be so enriching to exchange and to have different perspectives on life, different perspectives on life situations. We won't get that if we won't start working on ourselves and exchanging what we went through. Now I'm talking about my last point. The question is, why English? Even if I say I don't know, I exactly know why. The person I became, or the person I am now, there's so much influence in the past 2.5 years, in the past 4 years actually. I remember one sentence, like quite early in Australia when I was in Cairns, and I met some German guys, and I didn't actually like talk to them because I was with my friend and he was from Australia. I could hear the guy speaking German, and for some reason they approached me or like started talking to me, and even that I knew they're from Germany, I responded in English. But when it came to the question where we're from, and when I told them that I'm like from Germany, they switched to German, which is like, I get that. You're happy to meet someone who speaks the same language, especially because you express yourself just differently in your native language. But they switched to German, and so I switched to German as well. But like, we kept the conversation quite short, and then they left and I was with my friend, and the only thing he said to me was, it is crazy how it feels when you're surrounded by people who speak another language, because as soon as they switch to their language and you're the only person that doesn't understand it, you feel so excluded. And that hit me so hard. That was the moment I kept speaking English with people, even that I knew they were German. It always depended on the situation and the setting. If we would be just like alone, then obviously I'm like happy to speak my language. But even in a hostel, even if you think you're alone in the kitchen, I most of the time speak in English, because sometimes people come in and they're a bit shy, or like they need time to warm up in like the new setting and the new surrounding and new people. But if you speak in English, everyone understands. So it is easier for other people to just either jump into the conversation, or if they feel comfortable, just come back to the conversations you had. But it is not possible if you speak in your language. People who went through feelings, people who felt, for example, excluded, people who got bullied in school, they never want to let anyone feel that way. The empathy is a bit more present. He changed my perspective, because like, not necessarily changed, but like I wasn't aware of it. I'm really grateful for him saying that to me. I'm so used to speaking English, and I lived my life in such an intense way for the past 2.5 years. I live my day-to-day life in English. I tell stories in English. I express myself in English, talking to a person. I developed and grew in English, and that became my new identity. That became the person I am now. So even that I'm not fluent, it is part of me, and it is part of like a really important time of my life. So that's why I decided to start this podcast in English, especially for the reason I want to let people feel more love. If I do it in English, most of the people will understand and the message will go further. I know I'm not fluent in English. I know I will make mistakes, but I hope it will be okay. I hope you will be fine with that. And that being said, I would love to read your text I wrote. Actually, not that long ago. I think it was December or January. Obviously, you always go through ups and downs, especially living overseas or like traveling around. That was one down phase. Not really necessarily down, but I felt a bit lost in just being and in just the situation. Of course, sometimes things add up in a down phase, so that was definitely one of them. On top of that, there's the present state of being stuck between two languages, losing articulation and vocabulary in your mother tongue more and more, but not being fully fluent in a foreign language either. You lose another piece of your former self, of your identity. It's not just about being able to speak multiple languages, but about having built your own personality in the second language and gradually becoming that person in your mother tongue as well. Before, you went along with the change, but now you're starting to feel the change within yourself. I hope all of you will understand that I chose English. I know that I can't include everyone, but I try to best to exclude as less as I can. That was it with the second episode, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm really happy to welcome you in the third episode. That's where I will talk about my time here in Whistler, what I went through when I came here, because the people who are in Whistler, for the people who know Whistler, they know it is a special place to be. And it is a different place to be. I hope I will see you in my next episode.